All right, now we're going to do a little bit of evaluation. We're going to talk about some advantages of bureaucracy, some good things people think about it, and some disadvantages and some bad things here. But here's another example of bureaucracy you might not think about, but a national park is part of the federal bureaucracy here. You see U.S. Department of the Interior, the National Park Service. Those are all agencies, and so this is just a park, but that is part of the government. It delivers a service of letting you use the park, keeping you safe in the park, and all that. So let's talk about if the bureaucracy is good or bad. All right, first let's go with some criticisms. These are some things that people say about the bureaucracy, why the bureaucracy would be the least democratic. So first of all, the thing that's true about the bureaucracy that makes it non-democratic is that there's no one in the bureaucracy that is elected. Every single person here was either hired by an office or was appointed by the president. So there's no control of the population over who is in the federal bureaucracy, other than we have some control over who the president is. So we pick a president, and then the president makes all these choices. The people that work in the bureaucracy, their pay is based on their experience and not necessarily their performance. This is true of most government jobs here. They're not going to get raises because they do great jobs. They're not going to get pay cuts because they do poor jobs. They're going to get paid based on how long they have been in service. And that's not really the most efficient system of dealing with workers here. People in the federal bureaucracy rarely lose their job because of poor performance. This is because of a lot of those standard operating procedures that we talked about. But this is one of the reasons that people are critical of the bureaucracy. Basically, once you get a job in the federal government, you're probably not losing it. And if you are giving it less than 100% every day, you're not getting pay cuts, and you're probably not losing your job, because it's very, very hard to get rid of workers that are in the bureaucracy here. And that's frustrating for regular people, and people are frustrated because there's not opportunities for us as the public to hold the bureaucracy accountable. If you're unhappy with the service you receive from the federal government, there's not much you can do about it. All right, now other people that think the bureaucracy is good, here's some of the things they say about it, is that the bureaucracy is the most democratic aspect of the government here. And that's because the bureaucracy is what deals with the people. The bureaucracy interacts with regular people more than any branch of the government. You are probably going to get to interact with your congressman at some point, although it'll be rare and certainly not all the time. You are probably not ever going to interact with the President of the United States, and you're probably not going to interact with a Supreme Court justice, and maybe not even a federal judge at all. But you interact with members of the federal bureaucracy all the time. We mentioned this a little bit before, but the demographics in the bureaucracy look a lot like the demographics of the country. Women make up almost half of the federal bureaucracy. Minority groups make up about a little more than a third of the bureaucracy. And so this is important. It looks more like the population of the United States than any other part of the government does. Only half of the government employees, only half of these people working in the bureaucracy have a college degree. That is what the United States population looks like. Okay, that is reflective of the population. In Congress, they've all got a college degree. All of our presidents need to have a college degree. All of our judges, obviously, most of them have like law degrees and stuff. And that's not what America is like, but the bureaucracy is. The average salary for a federal government worker is about $80,000 a year. And while that may seem like a large number, that's way closer than any of the other salaries that we've talked about in the government. It's definitely smaller than a judge salary or the $400,000 that a president makes. So the bureaucracy looks like regular people, and that's why we might say this is the most democratic branch of government. Now, I've also got a lot of myths about the bureaucracy, and I know your book talked about these a little bit, but these are important because people say these things, and they're not all true, and they're not true at all, actually. And so this is important because this helps us get an idea of just attitudes towards the bureaucracy in general. So the first one of those would be that people hate bureaucrats. That's the thing people would say. Oh, bureaucrats. I hate bureaucrats. But what they mean, like, people hate the idea of a bureaucracy. I don't really know why, but people tend to hate the idea of a bureaucracy. But, like, people don't hate their mailman. People don't like hate the TSA agent that like helps them get on the airplane. All these regular people doing regular jobs, you don't hate these workers. So people don't really dislike bureaucrats. They tend to dislike the idea of the bureaucracy as a whole, but they don't really hate the people in the government that are doing work for them. Another myth is that the bureaucracy is always growing, that this government is just growing out of control. The bureaucracy is growing all the time. Now, that's just not true. The number of employees in the federal government has not been growing for a long time. The last big growth in federal government employees would have been right after the September 11th attack. So like right when you guys were not even born yet would be the last time that the government was growing. And the federal government has really stayed the same size in terms of numbers of employees. State bureaucracies are growing a lot, but the federal government is definitely not. Another myth about the bureaucracy is that these are all just people in DC and like they're separated from the population and all that. And that's just not true. Only about 1 out of every 7 employees is in DC, and all the rest of them are spread all throughout the country. They're in all of the cities, they're in small towns, they're, all over the place. Like, your parent might work for the federal government, or someone might work for the federal government, but these are regular people living all across the country. And then the last one here is that the bureaucracy is inefficient, that the bureaucracy always does a bad job. They're always slow. They're always not providing services the way they want. And that's also just not true. It's just it's the bureaucracy. When they do their job well, we don't say anything about it. We don't even notice when they do their job well. That's the thing. When there are problems, because it's the national government, it gets a lot of attention. So the problems get emphasized a lot, while what we actually see is that most of these agencies do a great job all the time. All right, so we've covered a little bit of stuff there that's going to help us evaluate the bureaucracy. Talk about what makes a bureaucracy democratic or what makes it undemocratic. We want to make sure that we understand those myths about the bureaucracy as well.